Another question is how much to visualize. This is a theme that I have gone back to repeatedly throughout my career, obsessing over what level of detail a visualization should have in order to communicate clearly. And the answer is it depends. It depends on the nature of the data. It depends on the nature of the story. What I would say though, is that people, particularly people who come from worlds such as visual design or journalism, like myself, we tend to oversimplify things, and we need to be careful with that. The flip coin is that people who comes from fields such as STEM fields, like mathematics, statistics, etc., they tend to overcomplicate things, right? So we need to find a middle ground between showing too much and showing too little. Now, how do you decide that? On a one by one case, right? It's like you need to pay attention to the data and then make a clear assessment of what level of granularity, what level of detail you need to communicate your story clearly. Quick example. In the United States, we see this type of graphic constantly, the murder rate in the United States, right? The murder rate in the United States went up during the 70s and the 80s, came down during the 90s, stayed more or less the same in the 2000s and 2010s. And then beginning in 2014, the murder rate has begun increasing again, and it has continued increasing. If we extend this line towards the present, the line continues increasing. Now, if you don't know that much about the data behind this line, behind this average, national average, the murder rate per 100,000 people all over the country, right? And most people don't know that much about this type of data, most readers, it is very easy to describe this chart saying the United States is becoming a more dangerous country just because the murder rate is increasing. And that is not true. It is absolutely not true that the United States is becoming a much more dangerous country. It all depends where you live, because you need to remember that the United States is actually not a country, it's a continent made of these several different countries, right? So the United States is very varied. There are places that are very violent and places that are very peaceful. People who analyze crime data in the United States, statisticians who work with this type of data will tell you that if we could plot every single place, every single neighborhood, for example, on the vertical axis over here, most places in the United States will be around the national rate or below the national rate, right? Most places will be there. We could envision each place, each town, each city, each neighborhood as a little dot positioned on the vertical axis. Most places are over here. But what is the challenge? And it's actually the reason why the murder rate has increased in the past few years. The challenge is that there are certain places, certain cities, certain neighborhoods in some cities, certain towns that have become so violent in the United States in the past 5-6 years that they skew the national rate. They are outliers. They are outliers, right? If we could try to plot them on this vertical axis, they will go through the roof. We could not even fit them on this scale. They will have their own scale, which will be much higher. Now, what I'm getting at is that the impulse of people who come from the world such as journalism or graphic design, etc., will be to show just this. Now, this might be appropriate in some cases. For example, if all places in the United States had a murder rate that is similar to the national rate, imagine that all dots that I showed you before were clustered around the national rate, then it will be enough just to show the national rate, just because the national rate represents what happens all over the country very clearly, because all places are very close to the national rate. But when you have a distribution that has such a huge range, and not only that, that is highly skewed, probably distorted by a few extreme values such as this one, you cannot just show the national rate, because if you show just the national rate, you are not informing people, you are misinforming them. You can show that, but then you need to explain that or try to show it. Now, the flip side of the coin is that people who have a background in statistics, science, engineering may go too far, and they may try to show every single place in the United States rather than just the national rate. And that will be too much. That may obscure the whole purpose of the visualization. So if I had to reason myself in this particular case, when it is too much, when it is too little, this is the way that I will do it. I will still show the national rate, but then I will explain this fact of these extreme values, and then I may visualize a few of those extreme values just to exemplify the role that they play in sort of like skewing the national rate in terms of murder. So there is always a way to reason these types of decisions.